in Michiana and Get Inspired Michiana, and thanks for watching. We are on another episode of Life Inspired, and our guest today is Miss Hope Muñiz. Thank you for coming.
Hi.
So grateful to have you. So we're going to tell our little crowd that's watching a little bit about Life Inspired in case you're a first-time viewer. What we're going to do is we're going to ask Hope 3 questions. She's got a great turning point story to share with us, and we like to ask, you know, hey, what was life like before this and then God moment in your life? So life was going along, there's a ... God intervenes and changes your trajectory, and then now you're walking an inspired life. What does that look like? How do you stay inspired? That kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So tell us, you are a cancer survivor.
I am.
So tell us a little bit about, tell us some backstory, Hope. What happened before you were diagnosed?
So my sister had just graduated from high school that year. It was in 2012.
Okay.
So my sister had just graduated from high school. I think like the weekend before I got diagnosed, I think was when her graduation party had been. And I had noticed that I was getting like more lightheaded, like in general, and like it was really hot that summer, and so my mom was thinking like maybe it was just that I was dehydrated, and so I started carrying a jug of water around with me. And then one day, it was a Wednesday because we had youth group that day. I had like been drinking water all day and I still wasn't feeling well. My sister had been iron deficient before, and so we thought maybe if I took some iron vitamins or something like that, maybe it would help some. Mm-hmm. And the next day, it was not helping at all. I had a like crushing headache pretty much all day. I was really tired. I just didn't really feel very well. And like I told my mom that like it just like what stuff wasn't helping and everything, and so we just kind of went through the day kind of because it was the summer at that point, so I was home by myself at that point. Right. And stuff. But we went through the day kind of just maybe it'll go away if I take some Tylenol or something, like the headache would go away and stuff. And so my parents and my brother and I went out to eat that evening, and I went inside, but I really wasn't very hungry because I just still didn't feel well. And then we had gotten home, and I'm literally sitting there, and like it just got really hard to breathe. Like it wasn't like it was like I couldn't catch my breath almost. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't like I felt like there was super amount of pressure or anything like that. It was just like I just literally felt like I couldn't get enough air. And so my mom took me to the ER, and I told her like I literally felt like I was dying because I just couldn't breathe. And I felt bad because about a month before this, I had gotten sick with a bunch of mouth sores that were completely unrelated. And that's part of what's so crazy about the timing of everything, is that just a month earlier we had all these blood tests and stuff done because I had this infection in my mouth that like was just causing a bunch of sores, and it hurt really bad. But so we had just spent all of this money on my health about a month beforehand, and so I felt bad that we were going to the ER again. But so
God said, I got this, Hope.
Exactly. And so my mom took me to the ER with my sister, and it was pretty late at night at this point. Mm-hmm. And they got me back in the ER, and I don't remember a ton of what happened because I just know that it was a lot of waiting while we were back there. But one of the first things that they do when you go to the ER is they take some blood tests so that they can get an idea of what's going on. And that was when they initially found out that there was something wrong. So a normal...
Because they compared those blood tests to the 1 month earlier blood test?
No, just because they were completely out of range. So normal white blood cell counts, which is... So the kind of cancer that I had was leukemia, which is where your white blood cells are not forming correctly one way or another. There's a couple different kinds, but specifically the kind that I had was that like there was so much incorrect white blood cells in my side of my bone marrow that all of like my blood cells couldn't mature far enough to actually be effective in anything. Wow. And so a normal white blood cell count is between 5,000 and 10,000.
Okay.
And normally if somebody has an infection, it'll go up to like 20,000 or something, but there's not a lot of variety within those numbers kind of thing. Okay. Most of the time if you see 20,000, you know it's a pretty serious infection, and that's about it. My white blood cell count was 133,000.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, which the only time that you'll really get a white blood cell count like that is in leukemia. Sometimes you can get it in other kinds of cancers like lymphoma, or you can get it with lupus, which is another like autoimmune disorder. And they weren't sure, and they told my mom these things outside of the room, and they told her that they weren't sure which one of the three it was, but because some of my other blood cell counts were so low that they were going to send me down to Riley's regardless. So because my white blood cells were so high, my red blood cells and my platelets, which the platelets are what help you clot, were not able to grow either, and so those counts were super low. And so when they got my blood while I was at the ER at home, my red blood cell count was 6.6, which normally it's between 12 and 14. And my platelets, which are normally your platelets should be above 200, my platelets were under 100, but that wasn't like their main concern at the point, and so like that number didn't really get thrown around a lot. But so they were 6.6, and that was probably about 11 o'clock at night when they took that test and got those results and everything. But when we got down to the Riley's ER in Indianapolis, which is about a 3 hours drive, which was probably about 4 to 5 hours after I had gotten to the ER in the first place. Mm-hmm. My red blood cells, when they retook my labs down there, were down to 5.5.
So it just kept dropping.
Yeah, and so it was one of those things of like we kind of realized that had we waited until morning, it probably wouldn't have been the best plan.
Wow.
So,
so
yeah.
now Hope has cancer.
Yes, and so when my mom came in and told me that the initial things were, they thought that I might have one of these things, either leukemia, lymphoma, or lupus, which ironically all three of them start with L.
Right.
But and they had different reasons behind each of them, because some of them had to do with family history, some of them had to do with some of my symptoms and stuff. But she came in and told me what was going on. First she pulled my sister out of the room and said, "Hey, go get your dad. This is what's going on," because my dad and my brother were still at home, and they would have had time. Like, we didn't live far away, and so they would have had time to come back and see me before they left.
Before they took you to
pretty
Indy.
much, yeah. And so she told my sister what was going on. Then she came in and told me, and so I grew up in a Christian home, and so it's one of those things of like, we always had this mentality of like, God's got this, and both of my parents were in the military, and so they have a lot of experience with like crisis intervention stuff, one way or another, because like my mom worked for Red Cross when I was younger, and it's just something both of my parents have always done. And so typically when something crazy happens like that, our family reacts decently to it, because it's just something like that's how God wired my family in general. And so my mom came in and told...
That's a huge blessing.
It really is.
That's
we had
such a gift.
Completely unrelated, but a few years ago we had a minor house fire and everything, and the same thing happened, in the sense of like everybody was okay. Even my little brother, who at the time was probably only 8 years old or so, handled it really well, just because that's just how our family operates, and it's so nice.
Wow. Okay.
So anyway, so my mom came in and told me, and it was one of those situations of, it was just me and her, and she's like, "It's okay to cry, but we got to remember that God's got this, and it's going to be okay." And very early on, like from that point on to the point, like there were not many more tears shed on my behalf. I know my mom did, but my mom never did it in front of me because she didn't want me to feel weird about it. And it was one of those things of like, my parents wanted me to have as much hope as I could, kind of thing.
Because you are hope.
Exactly. And so so it became a thing of God's got this. Crying's not going to help anymore, so why keep crying, kind of thing.
Okay.
Did
you feel like crying? I mean, you're 15 years old,
I
right?
mean, there were still times that I did cry.
But you're like 15,
yes,
right?
I was 15 when this all happened and stuff. And so I cried initially and stuff. Part of the reason that I didn't cry as much is because my parents were careful about what kind of information I was given at the time. So like my survival rate, when they finally like got around to the full diagnosis and stuff, my parents didn't tell me what my survival chances were. They let me know certain aspects because they knew I wanted to be involved in my care, because I always wanted to work in healthcare and stuff, and it was just something I was
even
interested
before
in.
you got cancer, you knew you wanted healthcare. Interesting. Okay.
It did, however, change my career path in a slight way, because of where I decided I wanted to work within healthcare. Kind of thing.
Okay.
But so my parents let me be involved in stuff, but they also didn't let me know some of those more drastic and disappointing numbers.
Right.
So
because your survival rate was like,
it was 30%, and my mom even told me, like, because I didn't know this until way after the fact when we were talking about it to our church and stuff. I didn't know that my survival chance was so low. And they said that 30% was being generous at that point, because the kind of cancer that I had, which is called acute myeloid leukemia, only 4% of kids who are diagnosed with leukemia, or only 20% of kids who are diagnosed with leukemia in general, have that diagnosis. And then only 20% of children who are diagnosed with AML leukemia end up having the FLT3 mutation, which is a really not
Which is
fun
what you
mutation.
had.
It is what I had. It's not a very fun one because it tends to come back a lot, and it's really resistant to some of the typical chemotherapies that they use for it. And so what happened was, and that ends up being 4% of all children who are diagnosed with leukemia at all end up getting that one. But I didn't know that my chances were so low and everything. Most of the time, if I was not okay with where things were at that point, it wasn't like a crying moment. It was like I got to talk through this kind of thing, because I've always been a verbal processor for a lot of things. And it became one of those things of, I cried when I first got diagnosed, or like when they first figured out that might be what was going on, because it was like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. But I cried. The only other significant time that I can remember that I was crying was right after I had finished my first month of treatment. And it was more so because like I wanted to go home. I had been gone away from home for so long. I had lost all of my hair at that point, and stuff just didn't really feel normal anymore. And it was just one of those things of like, I was homesick, and it was something new, and it just wasn't something that I was used to at that point. So that was really the only 2 times that I had like heavily cried. But it was, a lot of it became because I knew that my story was helping other people. I was really lucky in the majority of the time that I was on chemotherapy treatments and stuff. I felt fairly well. And so
that is a gift too.
It really was. And it ended up helping me be, trying to think of like the word, it ended up helping me be a motivator for other kids on the unit too.
Wow.
Because it's really hard to have a good attitude a lot of times when you're going through something so hard, especially when you're a kid and you've been going, because a lot of times when you have any kind of leukemia, it's a longer treatment than you really kind of expect. If the other kinds of leukemia that there are have to do with different areas of white blood cells and stuff, and those treatments, like AML leukemia has the shortest treatment out of all leukemias, and that's just because it is either you do 4 months of chemotherapy, or if you have the mutation that I have, you do 3 months of chemotherapy and then you have a bone marrow transplant. And that can be a long recovery, but it's not like you're getting active treatment for as long as time. Whereas a couple of the other kinds of the leukemia that are pretty common among kids end up having like a 2 to 3 year treatment program.
Oh, wow.
Like it can be really long and it can be really discouraging. And so it was helpful to be able to like have that energy and that general feeling of well-being a lot of times, even though I knew I wasn't like well. I knew that I had more energy than most kids do. And so that was really helpful. So my treatment ended up being 3 months of chemotherapy, and so it would be 2 to 3 days of like some really, really intense chemotherapy, and then they would wait for my white blood cell count to go all the way down to 0, because they wanted to wipe everything out, because that was where the cancer was. And then they would wait for it to come back up to a certain point before they would let me go home for a week, which would give me like, it gives you like a month break in between each actual like administering of chemotherapy. But so I would go home for a week in between each, and then I would come back and do another couple of days of really intense chemotherapy. And then so one of the tests that they do to see how extensive the cancer is they do a bone marrow aspirate, which is where they stick this really, really long and painful needle into your hip bone.
Ouch.
And they take out some of your bone marrow so that they can test it and see what it's really where it's really at. When they had done the very first one, which luckily when they do it on kids, most of the time they will like knock you out for it. So it was helpful. But the very first one that they had done, 98% of my bone marrow was cancer. 98% of it was cancer.
Wow.
Which is pretty crazy considering that bone marrow is in literally every single bone of your body.
Right.
And so only 2% of my bone marrow was still active at that point.
Wow.
And then after the first month of treatment, when they did the second test, it ended up going down to like 93% or something like that. Like it was still in the 90s, but it was lower. Like, so it was obvious that stuff was working, but that's obviously not low enough for them to say that I was in remission yet.
Right.
And so they did another round of treatment, and then I had gotten onto an experimental drug called sorafenib that it's been used in adults and it's been used in other cancers and stuff, but it hadn't really been used in leukemia treatment yet. And the experimental program that that Riley's was supposedly using at the time, I had just barely missed the window for it. But we had a really good oncologist that did a lot of research stuff, and so she was able to get me onto the medication and have my insurance pay for it instead of going through this study. And I still ended up getting the exact same treatment that somebody who would have been on the study for had gotten. So that was nice. And then So we had started that the second month, and then after the second month when we came back and started the third round of treatment and they did the next bone marrow aspirate and everything, they finally said that I could be in remission. That didn't mean I didn't still have to have that bone marrow transplant, but it meant that at least like we knew the treatment was working, so that was really good. So by September of 2012, thank you, I was considered in remission.
Wow.
Which was really confusing for a lot of our community members because it was like, well, if she's in remission, why is she still getting treatment? And so that was kind of hard to explain. But so in September, we did the last round of treatment and stuff. And then after September, for pretty much all of October, I was kind of at home because before they do the bone marrow transplant, they want to give your body a little bit more time to rest and stuff. And there's a lot of paperwork that has to happen and stuff too. So it ends up being a good time to like take a break from everything. So most of October I was home, and then at the very end of October we went back and we did 5 really intense days of chemotherapy, and then I had 1 day of rest, and then on that 7th day was when I had my bone marrow transplant, and that ended up being November 2nd. My sister ended up being my donor, which was really impressive because most of the time family members are not a match. Which is one of the reasons that getting set up on a bone marrow donor registry is really important for a lot of people because it doesn't take much from the donor. It's like a one day recovery time kind of thing. But they do it the same way. They do it the same way they do the bone marrow aspirate of like they stick these really long needles in and they take some of your bone marrow out. But in a healthy person, it regenerates fairly fast. And so most of the time family members are not matches, just like with any other kind of transplant. Like sometimes family members can be matches, but most of the time they're not. But my sister ended up being a perfect match.
Wow.
And so she was my donor, which is crazy because that means that she saved my life twice now. Because my mom had also worked at the American Red Cross, and so we had learned a lot of those like CPR or Heimlich maneuver things when we were really little. Not that it was accurate at the time, but like we had learned those kind of things, and so my sister had also given me the Heimlich maneuver at a separate time in life. So she had saved my life twice.
Wow.
But it all has to be gravity fed, so it took like literally all day long for the transplant to happen. But I was awake during the whole thing because it just the way that they do it is just like a blood transfusion. They just have to do it through gravity because they don't want to damage the cells with a pump. So I was awake during the whole day, and most of the time kids are really tired that day because they had just gone through a lot of chemo and stuff, and I was tired the day before. The day of, I was not tired kind of thing, which was really crazy. And it partially speaks to how much of a nerd I am, but it also partially speaks to the kind of mindset and energy that God gave me at the time of I had taken, because I was doing classes online at this point because that was just kind of what worked out for us. And my high school is really cooperative in a lot of these things. So I was taking chemistry online at that point, and I took my chemistry final and got an A while I was getting my bone marrow transplant, which is just kind of funny because most people think you're not awake when you're getting a transplant.
Right.
And for most things you're not, but this is just a different one.
Right.
And so that was just, it kind of speaks to my nerdy side a little bit too.
So now when you emailed me stuff before we were going to come on the show, you said God really gave you an attitude adjustment. So tell me a little bit about that. Tell me how he turned your attitude from, you said it has to do, you cannot recover without the right attitude.
Exactly.
So I know that a lot of our viewers are going to be viewers that are going through cancer. I mean, that's why they're watching your story, because they want to hear, you know, how can I have hope like Hope?
Right.
So tell us about the attitude adjustment.
So, and it was easier for me, and I can say that right now, like it's going to be a lot easier when you have more energy and stuff, and that was part of what made it easier for me to make that change. But it was one of those things of like crying's not going to help. And so, yeah, it's okay to cry, but unless you really feel like you need to cry, it's not going to help, because the only time that really helps is helping get your emotions in line and stuff like that. But in terms of like your overall outcome, crying is not going to make the situation better. And so it really became your attitude is everything. And the specific story that I know really brought this around was that there was another girl that was on the floor with me, but she had the other kind of leukemia that takes 2 to 3 years to treat at least, and she was having a lot of complications, and she was one of the patients that the healthcare team was trying to get me to socialize with a little bit to try to help her get up out of bed, because I was up out of bed, and so it gave her somebody her own age to deal with these things. She had a lot of complications because her attitude was negative. And it's not so much that like she had this idea of like, oh, I'm just like poor me kind of thing or whatever. It was just like this is so hard. And like,
I can't do this, it's too hard.
Exactly. And especially because she was going through so much, because most of the time for that other kind of leukemia, it's all done outpatient. Like, you're not in the hospital for most of it. But she ended up in the hospital with some of the complications that happened. And for somebody, it's really rare that you see pressure injuries in younger people, because pressure injuries are caused by not moving around, and then one of your bones ends up putting too much pressure on your skin, and it causes like almost like just this opening in your skin kind of thing. But she ended up getting the starting of some pressure injuries because she wasn't getting out of bed. She wasn't doing a lot of the things that really help your outcome overall. And so it was a drastic difference, because like my sister and I would like do laps around the unit because they want us to get up and walk, and so we would just sit there and just walk around and stuff. And like I would make daily trips down to McDonald's with the night nurses because that was something I liked to do, and there was a McDonald's downstairs at the time. And it was just one of those things of like, it didn't come down to like, oh, I'm more willing to do activity than she is. It really came down to an attitude of I felt like I was going to get through it, in the sense of I was okay with whatever happened, but I was still going to keep fighting in an active way, because there's two different types of fighting when it comes to cancer. There's the I'm letting my body do it for me, and there's the I'm going to sit here and do anything that I can to get through this. And not everyone's at that point, and that's okay, because it's a really hard thing to go through. And if you really feel like you just want to like let things go, that's more than okay too. But for the sake of you don't have a terrible prognosis overall. Your attitude makes so much more of a difference than you think it does. And if you have an attitude of I don't know how I'm going to get through this, you're not gonna realize it at the time, but you're gonna end up not doing all of the things that could be helping you. And it's one of those things of somebody from the outside looking in is going to be able to see those things so easy, but somebody like in the middle of it is not going to be able to see how the biggest difference it's going to make, kind of thing.
Right. So we always want to talk about how do you stay inspired, because our viewers, I always say, you know, we all have a different way to connect with God, just as different as our retinal scans or our fingerprints, right? And so so your attitude, in my opinion, probably was helped because of your relationship with God, because there were people praying for you. Right. So how do you connect with God on a daily basis or whatever to keep your attitude in check and to get that right mindset for whatever you have to do today, whether it's to go through your chemo stuff or whether it's to go serve on the hospital floor, because now she's a cancer nurse, an oncology nurse. So so what do you do daily?
So throughout all of this, we kind of realized I had a couple of mental disorders. So like I have anxiety, and it's kind of mixed with panic disorder, because I do have panic attacks sometimes. And this was this all happened before I had gotten diagnosed. It just kind of came out and got realized when I was there. So I have an emotional support animal. He's my cat. He's a black and white cat, so he's a tuxedo cat, and his name is Nori, and he's adorable, and he acts more like a dog than he does a cat sometimes. So I do have an emotional support animal, but I also do really like to do things that give me an opportunity to work with my hands, so that it feels like I'm multitasking, but I'm not. So like I've recently gotten into gardening. I also like to knit and crochet a lot, and like do a lot of crafty things like that. My husband's a second grade school teacher, and so I get to help with that kind of stuff a lot too.
I didn't know that, Victor. Thank you. Victor's watching it with us today.
Yeah. So so I like to do a lot of those kind of things because it gives me an opportunity to get those kind of things out. But one of the ways that I still stay connected with God is I am really a huge fan of like doing worship music and stuff just during your daily stuff. Cool. Some of the things that I've learned that help me connect with God more while I've gone through nursing school and stuff is things like sitting and just thinking through stuff in like a quiet or like whatever, in an atmosphere that calms you most, because otherwise it's just going to feel like it's not actually getting you anywhere. There's a lot of different things that we talk about in nursing school that have been things along the lines of like, how do you cope with stress the most and stuff like that. And it's a matter of figuring out what makes you calm. And it's something that as much as it's going to sound very odd. You can find God in literally everything, no matter what your hobby is, and not everyone's going to be able to see that. So like my dad is really big on hunting because he finds God in nature kind of thing. That's not so much my thing. I'm more along the lines of like if I'm sitting there listening to worship music on my drive to go to work or something, that's probably where I'm going to feel like I talk to God most kind of thing. But not everybody experiences it the same way.
Exactly.
So.
Exactly. Not everybody does. So, well, you guys, thank you so much for watching. Hope, thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
I know that if you are a cancer survivor or cancer victim right now, that Hope would be happy to visit with you if you happen to find yourself on the oncology unit at St. Joe. Maybe you'll get Hope for your nurse, so that's pretty cool. And but yeah, if you want to have coffee, message us here and we'll get you in touch. If you know someone that needs to sit on the red couch and talk about how they connect with God, we'd love to have their story as well. And as we fade out, we want to thank Daryl Buchanan for We Have Jesus. Love that great song by Daryl Buchanan. Thank you guys and have a great weekend. Bye-bye.
Yes, yes, we have Jesus from a spirit in heaven.